A lobster thrashes in boiling water. A chimpanzee screams inside a sterile lab. A fish gasps for air on the deck of a ship. Are they truly suffering? Or is it just instinct? For centuries, humans believed animals couldn't feel pain. That their cries were just noise. That their reactions were mechanical. But today, science is challenging that belief. From the nerve endings of pigs, to the brains of octopuses, to the quiet grief of elephants, we're learning that animals may feel far more than we ever imagined. This isn't just about biology. It's about ethics. About responsibility. Because if animals feel pain like us, what does that mean for how we treat them?
Before we begin, if you're someone who believes that compassion should extend beyond just our own kind, that science has the power to shift hearts as well as minds, then this video is for you. Hit like to help this message reach others. Subscribe if you want more truth-driven deep dives into the lives of animals and the unseen connections we share. And most importantly, stay with us, because what you're about to discover might change the way you see the world forever. For much of human history, animals were not seen as sentient beings capable of feeling pain. In fact, many early thinkers believed animals lacked consciousness entirely. One of the most influential voices behind this idea was 17th century philosopher René Descartes, who argued that animals were mere machines, automata, driven by instinct but incapable of thought, emotion, or suffering. To Descartes and his followers, an animal's cry during injury wasn't a scream of pain, but simply a mechanical response, like a clock chiming when struck. This belief had devastating consequences. In Europe, scientists and philosophers openly performed live dissections on conscious animals, dismissing their reactions as meaningless noise. Dogs were nailed to boards and vivisected without anesthesia, all under the assumption that they weren't truly suffering. Even as the centuries passed, this mechanistic view of animals lingered. It offered convenient justification for industries that used animals for food, labor, science, and entertainment. After all, if animals couldn't feel pain the way we do, then why worry? But today we know better. The idea that animals are mindless automatons has been shattered by decades of neuroscience, behavioral studies, and common observation. We now understand that many species, especially mammals and birds, possess complex nervous systems, pain receptors, and even emotional responses that mirror our own. Still, remnants of Descartes' thinking remain deeply embedded in society. From factory farms to animal testing labs, outdated assumptions continue to shape how animals are treated. Before we explore the science that dismantles these myths, we must first face the uncomfortable truth. For hundreds of years, our cruelty was fueled not by evidence, but by denial. To understand how animals experience pain, we must first understand how they think, or more precisely, how their brains are wired. For decades, it was assumed that because animals had smaller brains, they must be less intelligent, less emotional, and therefore less capable of suffering. But size doesn't equal complexity. Modern neuroscience reveals that many animals, from primates to pigs, possess highly developed brain regions that process sensation, emotion, and memory, the very building blocks of what we understand as pain. Take the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotion and memory. Humans rely on it to process feelings like fear, pleasure, and pain. And yet, this same structure exists in most mammals and even birds. The amygdala, which helps us feel fear, and the hippocampus, which stores emotional memory, are found in dogs, elephants, crows, and more. When these animals are hurt, their brains don't just register physical damage. They also light up in the same emotional centers that respond to pain in humans. But it doesn't stop with mammals and birds. Octopuses, creatures with no bones and entirely different brain structures, have shown signs of pain avoidance, learning, and even depression after injury. Scientists have observed octopuses favoring an uninjured arm after trauma, a clear behavioral sign of pain memory. This raises a deeper question. If such neurologically distant species can feel pain, how far down the evolutionary ladder does pain truly go? Despite this growing evidence, many institutions still cling to the idea that human pain is somehow more real or more meaningful. But the truth is unsettling. The same brain structures that make us recoil from a flame or cry out in grief also exist, often in remarkably similar form, in the animals we farm, test, and hunt. The biology doesn't lie. Pain is not a human experience. It is a biological reality, one we share more widely than we've been taught to believe. Neuroscience gives us the hardware, but behavior gives us the proof. Across the animal kingdom, creatures display responses to injury that go far beyond simple reflex. They limp, lick wounds, avoid pain-inducing environments, and in some cases, show signs of emotional distress long after the injury is healed. Take the humble rat. In laboratory settings, rats that experience pain will voluntarily consume painkillers. Not just any food, but specifically those laced with analgesics, indicating both awareness of discomfort and the desire to relieve it. They'll also choose to avoid places where they previously felt pain, suggesting memory and fear, emotions tightly linked to suffering. In the wild, elephants have been observed gently touching and tending to the wounds of injured herd members. Primates, including chimpanzees and macaques, cradle broken limbs and exhibit facial expressions resembling sadness or anxiety when injured. Chickens, often dismissed as simple animals, will protect an injured companion or show stress-related behaviors like feather pulling when in pain. One of the most haunting examples comes from dairy cows. When their calves are taken away, often within 24 hours of birth, many cows bellow for days, search the area restlessly, and even lose their appetite. This isn't just a physical reaction, it's grief. The emotional pain of separation echoes behavior seen in grieving humans. And then there's the matter of empathy. Studies have shown that mice will become more sensitive to pain if they see other mice in distress. This social transfer of pain, essentially shared suffering, further blurs the line between human and animal experience. If an animal can not only feel pain, but also recognize it in others, how can we continue to deny their emotional depth? From limping dogs to grieving whales, the behavioral evidence is undeniable. Pain in animals isn't hidden. It's visible, vocal, and in many cases, profoundly emotional. Neuroscience gives us the hardware, but behavior gives us the proof. Across the animal kingdom, Creatures display responses to injury that go far beyond simple reflex. They limp, lick wounds, avoid pain-inducing environments, and in some cases, show signs of emotional distress long after the injury is healed. Take the humble rat. In laboratory settings, rats that experience pain will voluntarily consume painkillers. Not just any food, but specifically those laced with analgesics, indicating both awareness of discomfort and the desire to relieve it. They'll also choose to avoid places where they previously felt pain, suggesting memory and fear, emotions tightly linked to suffering. In the wild, elephants have been observed gently touching and tending to the wounds of injured herd members. Primates, including chimpanzees and macaques, cradle broken limbs and exhibit facial expressions resembling sadness or anxiety when injured. Chickens, often dismissed as simple animals, will protect an injured companion or show stress-related behaviors like feather pulling when in pain. One of the most haunting examples comes from dairy cows. When their calves are taken away, often within 24 hours of birth, many cows bellow for days, search the area restlessly, and even lose their appetite. This isn't just a physical reaction, it's grief. The emotional pain of separation echoes behavior seen in grieving humans. And then there's the matter of empathy. Studies have shown that mice will become more sensitive to pain if they see other mice in distress. This social transfer of pain, essentially shared suffering, further blurs the line between human and animal experience. If an animal can not only feel pain, but also recognize it in others, how can we continue to deny their emotional depth? From limping dogs to grieving whales, the behavioral evidence is undeniable. Pain in animals isn't hidden. It's visible, vocal, and in many cases, profoundly emotional. For years, scientists debated whether animals could truly feel pain or if their reactions were just mechanical, reflexes without consciousness. But today, breakthroughs in neuroscience, behavior, and even pharmacology are dismantling those old assumptions. One major shift came with the rise of functional MRI studies in animals. Dogs, for instance, have been trained to lie still inside scanners, revealing not just brain activity, but patterns remarkably similar to humans when experiencing pain or joy. The anterior cingulate cortex, often linked to emotional suffering in humans, also lights up in dogs when exposed to distressing stimuli. It's not just pain, it's emotional pain. In octopuses, animals with completely different nervous systems, researchers found signs of pain-related learning and avoidance. One study showed that octopuses would avoid places where they previously received a painful injection. Even more astonishing, they appear to rub or guard the affected area, hinting at a subjective experience of pain. In birds, particularly chickens and parrots, scientists discovered complex pain expressions, facial grimacing, vocal shifts, changes in posture. These findings help build the grimace scales used now to assess animal pain more objectively, a huge step forward from guessing or assuming. Pharmaceutical studies add another layer. Animals given pain relief, such as morphine or NSAIDs, not only stop showing pain behaviors, but often return to normal eating, grooming, and movement. If the drug eases the symptoms, doesn't that suggest they were suffering in the first place? This body of evidence, from brain scans to behavior to biology, now supports the idea that animal pain is not merely possible, but probable, even in species once considered simple. Science isn't just revealing what animals feel, it's rewriting our understanding of their lives. And with this understanding comes a question: what responsibilities do we carry now that we know? For centuries, animals were seen through a lens of separation, as tools, machines, or resources created solely for human use. Philosophers like René Descartes shaped Western thinking by claiming that animals had no souls, no minds, and crucially, no ability to feel pain. Their cries, he argued, were mechanical reactions, not signs of suffering. This belief justified centuries of experimentation, exploitation, and neglect. But that narrative is breaking down. The idea that animals are sentient, capable of feeling both physical pain and emotional distress, is now a growing consensus in science, law, and philosophy. And it's not just about new discoveries in neuroscience. It's about a cultural awakening, a moral reckoning, a shift in how we see ourselves in relation to other living beings. In recent years, governments around the world have begun to legally recognize animal sentience. In the UK, the Animal Welfare Sentience Act acknowledges that animals can feel pain, pleasure, fear, and joy. In New Zealand, octopuses, crabs, and lobsters are now legally protected as sentient beings. Spain's courts have declared animals living beings with feelings, and India has gone as far as recognizing certain animals as legal persons. This is more than symbolic. It means animals are no longer seen as property, but as beings with interests that deserve protection. Religions are shifting too. Buddhism has always embraced compassion for all sentient beings, but now Christian and Islamic thinkers are re-evaluating the ethics of factory farming, animal testing, and even diet. There's a growing awareness that kindness to animals isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. Pop culture plays a role as well. Viral videos showing elephants mourning their dead or pigs playing with toys spark empathy worldwide. A new generation is growing up understanding that animals don't just survive, they feel. The age of denial is ending. And with it comes a question we can't ignore. What will we do now? If animals truly feel pain like us, if they suffer, grieve, and fear, then every industry that uses animals must face the consequences of that truth. From the food we eat to the clothes we wear, from research labs to zoos, our relationship with animals is built on convenience, tradition, and profit, not compassion. But the science is changing the story, and with it, the ethics. Let's start with food. Factory farming confines billions of animals in small cages, cutting beaks, tails, and horns without anesthesia. Pigs scream when separated from their young. Cows bellow for days when their calves are taken. Chickens huddle in dark, crowded sheds, unable to stretch their wings. We now know these are not just instinctual reactions. They're experiences of pain, fear, and distress. So what does that mean for our meals? For many, it means exploring alternatives, humane farming, plant-based diets, or lab-grown meat. In scientific research, millions of animals are still used in experiments, often without adequate pain control. Yet, with advancements in computer modeling and synthetic biology, alternatives are more viable than ever. The ethical question is clear. If a sentient creature can suffer, Should we continue using them as tools? Even in entertainment, circuses, aquariums, wildlife parks, the cost of amusement is often hidden. Orcas in tanks develop depression. Elephants forced to perform show signs of PTSD. The idea that animals exist solely for our pleasure is becoming harder to defend. This shift doesn't mean abandoning all human-animal interaction. It means reimagining it, with empathy at the center. Animal welfare laws are catching up, but slowly. The real power lies in the choices we make, what we buy, what we support, and what we tolerate. Every act of cruelty is enabled by silence, but every act of compassion starts with awareness. We're not just asking whether animals feel pain. We're asking what kind of humans we want to be. Our understanding of animal pain is shaped not just by science, but by centuries of belief, some compassionate, others disturbingly indifferent. Ancient civilizations saw animals through wildly different lenses. In ancient Egypt, animals were revered, cats were sacred, even mummified. Hindus believed cows embodied divine life, while many indigenous cultures treated animals as spiritual equals, beings with souls, emotions, and messages. But the Western world took a darker turn. In the 17th century, French philosopher René Descartes famously declared animals were automata, biological machines with no real feelings. According to Descartes, an animal crying out in pain was no different than a broken clock making noise. This view became convenient. It justified vivisection, animal labor, and the early roots of industrial farming. And so, for centuries, animals were dissected alive, whipped in streets, caged in zoos, and worked to death, all under the belief they couldn't truly suffer. Even when animals screamed, bled, or fought back, society claimed it was just instinct, not emotion. But not everyone agreed. Thinkers like Jeremy Bentham, the father of utilitarianism, asked a radical question. The question is not, can they reason? Nor can they talk? But can they suffer? That idea planted a seed, one that would grow into today's animal welfare movement. In the 19th century, with Darwin's theory of evolution, the moral gap began to shrink. If humans evolved from animals and share the same anatomy, emotions, and brains, how could we deny them the experience of pain? The past shows us that belief can blind, but it can also evolve. History is not just a record of cruelty, but a map of awakening. To understand where we are now, we must confront where we've been. For centuries, people assumed that animals were guided solely by instinct. Emotions? That was a human luxury. But today, neuroscience is rewriting that story, and the truth is far more profound than anyone imagined. Modern brain scans, especially fMRI, show that many animals process emotions in the same regions as humans. When a dog sees its owner after a long day, the brain's caudate nucleus, associated with love and attachment, lights up just like it does in a child reunited with a parent. When rats hear their cage mates in distress, they exhibit signs of anxiety and even attempt to comfort them. Some primates, elephants, and birds grieve their dead, touching the body, staying nearby, or making unusual vocalizations for days. In one study, researchers recorded pigs showing signs of joy when reunited with friends and depression-like symptoms when isolated. Octopuses, once seen as cold-blooded in every sense, have shown signs of pain avoidance and preference, even choosing different tank environments based on prior trauma. It's not just higher mammals. Bees appear to experience emotional states. In a 2016 study, bumblebees exposed to sugary rewards became more optimistic in ambiguous situations, a behavior strikingly similar to how dopamine affects human mood. And then there's laughter. Yes, laughter. Chimps, rats, and even dolphins exhibit vocalizations remarkably close to giggling when tickled or engaged in play. So what defines emotion? Is it facial expression, hormonal shifts, behavioral changes? Perhaps it's all of these, but more importantly, perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. The evidence is mounting. Animals don't just react, they feel. Joy, sadness, anger, affection, loss. And if they feel, truly feel, then what does that mean for the way we treat them? Sometimes it takes a single horrifying incident to force the world to open its eyes. In 2012, a viral undercover video shook the internet. Workers at a major dairy farm in the U.S. were filmed kicking newborn calves, dragging them by their legs, and leaving them to die in filth. The footage caused a national outcry, not just because of the cruelty, but because the calves screamed, and those screams sounded too human. It wasn't the first time. Decades earlier, the story of Lucy the chimpanzee, raised as a human child in a language experiment, ended in tragedy. When researchers returned Lucy to the wild, she couldn't adapt. She cried, signed for help, and eventually died, alone and confused. Her story led to the re-examination of primate research ethics across the globe. Then there was Phoenix the pig, who leapt from a moving truck bound for slaughter in 2006 and ran for miles. Rescued and placed in a sanctuary, Phoenix became a symbol, not of escape, but of agency. News outlets framed her not as a commodity, but as an individual who wanted to live. Another pivotal moment, the 2020 expose of a global pet breeding facility where thousands of beagles were found living in metal cages used in cruel drug tests. The public outcry led to the facility's closure and the rehoming of over 4,000 dogs. Videos of their first moments touching grass went viral. Some ran, some froze. All were visibly overwhelmed. These cases transcend data. They're stories that touched nerves, sparked protests, and forced companies, institutions, and governments to rethink their standards. Because when the world sees an animal express fear, hope, or love, not as an abstract idea, but through eyes that mirror our own, it becomes much harder to look away. Public perception is shifting, not from facts, but from feelings. And once compassion takes root, change becomes not only possible, but inevitable. We live in a paradox. On one hand, we cuddle our pets, grieve their deaths, and treat them as family. On the other, we fund industries that exploit animals by the billions, often without realizing it. Modern society rests on animal use. From factory-farmed meat and dairy to leather goods, cosmetics tested on animals, and biomedical research. But if animals can suffer in ways eerily similar to us, if their brains register pain, fear, even depression, then every decision becomes an ethical one. Do we need animal testing to save human lives? Or can modern science, with organ-on-chip tech, computer simulations, and cell cultures, offer alternatives? Do we need meat and dairy every day to thrive? Or can plant-based and lab-grown innovations feed us without violence? Even our entertainment choices come into question. Elephants in circuses, orcas in marine parks, greyhounds forced to race. Behind the glamour, there's often neglect, coercion, and suffering hidden from public view. Laws are evolving. In 2021, the UK legally recognized crabs, lobsters, and octopuses as sentient, capable of feeling pain and distress. Countries like Switzerland, Austria, and the Netherlands have banned certain types of animal testing and farming practices. But enforcement is patchy and loopholes remain. Consumers are increasingly uncomfortable. Polls show most people believe animals can feel pain, yet few understand the scale of suffering happening behind closed doors. So we face a moral crossroads. If animals are not just property, but living beings with inner lives, then convenience can no longer be an excuse. The question is no longer, can they feel? We know they can. The question is now, what will we do about it? As science advances, so does our capacity to reduce or even eliminate animal suffering. Enter a new frontier: synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Technologies reshaping how we interact with animals and how we meet human needs without harming them. In a lab, organ-on-a-chip devices now mimic human organs for testing drugs and diseases. They're small, transparent chips lined with living cells that behave just like a lung, liver, or heart, allowing scientists to study illness and cure it without ever touching an animal. AI models can simulate entire biological systems, predicting how a compound might react in the body without live trials. These tools are fast, precise, and ethically sound. Tech isn't just replacing animal testing, it's outpacing it. In the food world, lab-grown or cultivated meat is no longer science fiction. It's real. Meat without slaughter, eggs without hens, milk without cows. These innovations don't just spare lives, they reduce emissions, antibiotics, and disease risk. Even pets and companionship are evolving. Robotic pets, once clunky toys, now offer emotional support for elderly or allergic individuals. Some hospitals are using AI dogs to help children with autism build social bonds. No fear of biting, no need for feeding or cages. But these breakthroughs also force us to confront a deeper question. If we can meet our needs without causing harm, why wouldn't we? Technology won't solve ethics on its own, but it gives us options. And those options make an action a choice. We're entering an era where compassion and innovation can coexist, where pain isn't the price of progress. This isn't just about animals anymore. It's about what kind of humans we choose to be. For centuries, animals were treated as property, livestock, tools, entertainment. But over the last few decades, science has chipped away at that assumption. The once radical idea that animals feel not just pain but emotion, memory, and anticipation has finally broken into courtrooms and legislative halls. Around the world, the law is starting to listen. In 2022, the United Kingdom passed the Animal Welfare Sentience Act, formally recognizing that all vertebrate animals, as well as some invertebrates like octopuses and crabs, are sentient beings. That recognition wasn't symbolic. It came with policy consequences. Government decisions must now consider the emotional and physical welfare of animals in a meaningful way. New Zealand led earlier. In 2015, they rewrote their animal welfare law to declare explicitly that animals are sentient, able to experience both negative and positive emotions. And it's not just English-speaking countries. The European Union's Treaty of Lisbon, Article 13, makes a similar declaration. Some regions in India have even granted basic legal rights to animals, from elephants to stray dogs. What's remarkable isn't just the shift in tone, but what caused it. This legal evolution stems directly from mounting scientific evidence. Brain scans showing parallel structures between human and non-human pain centers, behavioral experiments demonstrating emotional trauma, and observational studies capturing animals grieving, bonding, and even sacrificing. The law is often slow to change, but when science, ethics, and public will align, the shift becomes inevitable. And when laws change, so does society's conscience. The question we must ask now is this: if our governments acknowledge that animals feel, should we not, as individuals, do the same in how we eat by test and live? Behind the charts, brain scans, and controlled studies lie the real, often heartbreaking stories that force us to look animals in the eye. Not as research subjects, but as sentient beings living through pain, fear, and loss. In a quiet corner of a neuroscience lab, a rat was observed refusing food. Not because it was ill, but because it had just watched its cage made endure an electric shock. The observing rat froze, groomed less, and ignored treats. It was as if the trauma didn't happen to it, but through it. Empathy in a rodent? The scientists were startled, but the behavior was real. Thousands of miles away, on the plains of Kenya, a matriarch elephant stopped over the skeletal remains of a long-dead relative. She touched the bones gently with her trunk. She lingered. Her herd waited. Researchers have documented dozens of these mourning rituals in elephants, suggesting not only memory, but grief, even ritualized farewell. And in a small vet clinic in Brazil, a rescuer brought in a street dog with shattered legs. Despite her agony, the dog wagged her tail and nudged the hand of a crying technician. Even in pain, animals often offer comfort. What does that say about their emotional range? And what does it say about us, who so often look away? Each of these stories is a window, a living, breathing example of what the science has been trying to tell us. Pain is not always visible, but behavior speaks volumes. And when we stop interpreting animal responses through human-centered filters and start listening on their terms, the message becomes devastatingly clear. They feel, they remember, they suffer, and they want it to stop. It's in these moments that pain becomes more than data. It becomes undeniable. For years, our empathy, scientific and emotional, stopped at mammals. Dogs, primates, elephants. These animals look more like us, behave more like us. But nature doesn't limit sentience to warm fur and soulful eyes. The next frontier of pain science is, quite literally, beneath the surface. Take fish, long dismissed as instinct-driven and barely aware. Fish have shocked researchers in recent decades. Trout, when injected with acetic acid, begin rubbing the affected area against tank surfaces, a reaction consistent with discomfort. When given the option, they seek out areas laced with painkillers. That's not a reflex. That's decision-making. Octopuses, with their alien bodies and ancient lineage, are rewriting everything we thought we knew about invertebrate awareness. In controlled studies, octopuses consistently avoid areas where they were previously injured or stressed. In 2021, a groundbreaking study showed they not only experience pain, but suffer emotionally from it. The UK government even updated its Animal Sentience Act to include cephalopods because of this evidence. Birds, especially parrots and corvids, not only show signs of physical pain but emotional anguish. A parrot separated from its mate exhibits symptoms akin to human grief, withdrawal, vocalizations, even self-harm through feather plucking. Chickens, too, show pain-specific responses, limping after injury and favoring non-injured limbs. The more we look, the more we find. It's not just dogs or dolphins. It's cuttlefish and pigeons. Pain, it turns out, is not a privilege of higher mammals. It's a survival mechanism embedded in life itself. And if life itself is wired to avoid pain, we must ask, how can we continue ignoring the cries we simply haven't learned to hear? Understanding animal pain isn't just about observing reactions. It's about designing tests that don't cross ethical lines while still revealing the truth. But here's the paradox. How do we study suffering without causing it? In humans, pain is self-reported. We could describe the intensity, the quality, sharp, burning, throbbing. But animals can't fill out a questionnaire. So scientists turn to proxies. Heart rate spikes, stress hormones, facial grimaces, and behavioral changes. One major breakthrough was the development of the grimace scale, a method of measuring subtle facial expressions of pain in mice, horses, rabbits, even sheep. A slight eye squeeze, tension around the nose, flatter ears. These small signals add up to a clearer picture of pain. But even with non-invasive tools, the ethics remain murky. Some tests, like thermal thresholds or surgical models, require inducing mild to moderate pain, often justified as necessary for breakthroughs in veterinary or medical care. Still, critics argue, if we need to cause pain to understand it, are we just chasing empathy through harm? Technologies like thermal imaging and AI-assisted behavior tracking now offer less invasive windows into animal pain. Cameras can detect tiny shifts in movement, posture, and breathing, allowing researchers to study discomfort without the animal ever being touched. Even better, AI can analyze thousands of hours of footage, flagging potential distress patterns faster and more accurately than humans. As science evolves, so must our moral compass. It's no longer enough to prove animals feel pain. The way we study that pain must reflect the very compassion our research hopes to inspire. The question now isn't just can animals feel pain, it's how far are we willing to go to understand it, and what are we willing to change once we do? Pain is not just a physical sensation, it's an emotional storm. In humans, pain is almost always tied to fear, anxiety, and sometimes trauma. The question we now face is not just whether animals feel pain, but whether they suffer in a way comparable to us. Science has begun to bridge this gap. In studies, injured animals, especially mammals, don't just respond with protective behaviors. They show signs of depression, lethargy, appetite loss, and social withdrawal. Rats kept in painful conditions stop grooming themselves. Dogs recovering from injury sometimes refuse to eat or engage with their favorite humans. Elephants grieving a lost herd member remain distant and motionless for days. These are not just instinctive reactions, they're emotional ones. Researchers have even found that some animals experience anticipatory suffering. In one study, octopuses subjected to pain avoided specific locations where the injury occurred, even when the source of pain was removed. That shows memory. That shows expectation. That shows emotional association with trauma. Birds like parrots and crows exhibit something close to what we'd call frustration or despair when confined, injured, or separated from companions. Many will self-mutilate, pulling feathers, pecking skin, behaviors likened to human responses to chronic emotional pain. The brain regions responsible for pain and emotion, like the amygdala and anterior cingulate cortex, are present and active in many non-human species. In imaging studies, these areas light up in similar ways to ours when animals are exposed to noxious stimuli. So while we may never fully know what a chicken or a dolphin feels, we are uncovering a chilling truth. Their pain may be more than reflexive. It may be personal, felt, remembered, feared. If animals don't just hurt, but suffer, then our entire relationship with them in labs, in farms, in homes must be re-examined. If animals experience pain, fear, and even sorrow, then a heavy moral question weighs on us. What do we owe them? For centuries, humans have justified the use of animals for food, labor, clothing, research, and entertainment, on the belief that animals are lesser beings, that they lack souls, thoughts, or real feelings. But if science now shows that they suffer, not just physically, but emotionally, can we still use them the same way? Imagine a pig in a factory farm, lying in a steel cage too small to turn around. If it squeals in pain, if it remembers fear, if it anticipates suffering tomorrow, then is it any different from a child locked away and forgotten? Consider medical testing. If a chimp in a lab flinches from a needle, not just because it hurts, but because it remembers the pain from yesterday and fears the pain of tomorrow, is this still justifiable progress or an ethical failing? Many scientists, ethicists, and lawmakers are starting to shift. Sentience is becoming the benchmark, not intelligence, not usefulness, but the capacity to feel. That alone may be enough to grant animals the moral right to compassion. Some countries are rewriting their legal systems, declaring animals not as property, but as sentient individuals with legal protections. Citizens are demanding ethical labeling, cruelty-free products, and reform in animal industries. Documentaries are changing minds. Courtrooms are hearing the silent cries of species that once had no voice. But laws alone aren't enough. We, humans, must look inward, at the way we eat, the way we shop, the way we teach our children to treat creatures smaller, weaker, and voiceless. If animals suffer, not as machines, but as fellow sentient beings, then we are not just caretakers. We are moral agents, and we must answer for how we use our power. The science is speaking. Are we ready to listen? We are living at a turning point in history. The question is no longer just can animals feel pain, but how will we respond to that knowledge? Across the globe, a quiet revolution is unfolding. Scientists are pushing boundaries, uncovering emotional complexity in species once thought to be simple. Octopuses solving puzzles, rats showing empathy, elephants mourning their dead. This isn't science fiction, it's documented, peer-reviewed reality. Technology is also opening new ethical doors. Lab-grown meat, once a futuristic dream, is now a reality, offering hope to reduce the suffering of billions of animals. Artificial intelligence is helping us better decode animal communication. Even virtual reality is being used to help humans experience the world from an animal's perspective, sparking compassion not from statistics, but from immersion. Education is shifting too. More schools are integrating animal ethics, biology, and empathy into their curriculums. Young people are growing up not just knowing that animals suffer, but caring that they do. And with that care comes action, consumer choices, political votes, and global movements. But the future is not just in the hands of scientists or lawmakers. It belongs to every one of us. To farmers who choose more humane practices. To corporations that commit to cruelty-free supply chains. To families who adopt instead of shop. And to storytellers, educators, and filmmakers who bring animal stories into the light. The future of animal ethics is not about perfection. It's about progress, about listening, evolving, and acknowledging that pain is pain, no matter whose body it lives in. If we can recognize that, then perhaps, just perhaps, we are moving toward a world where empathy isn't limited by species and justice is no longer reserved for the humankind alone. The science says they feel. The future asks us, what will we do about it? We began this journey with a question that has echoed through laboratories, farms, courtrooms, and hearts. Can animals feel pain like humans? Science has answered. The evidence is no longer ambiguous. From neurons firing in the octopus's brain to the silent cries of a calf separated from its mother, from the grimace of a lab monkey to the whimper of a sheltered dog, pain is not unique to us. It never was. And yet, our world is still structured around the idea that human suffering matters more. That animal pain is somehow lesser or justifiable. But when you peel back that belief, what remains? Fear? Habit? Convenience? The truth is, we are not separate from the animal kingdom. We are a part of it. Our brains are built from the same biological clay. Our hearts beat with the same electrochemical rhythm. And our capacity for suffering is a bridge, not a wall. This knowledge is not just informative. It is transformative. It asks us to choose differently, to question what we buy, what we eat, what we accept. It challenges industries, rewrites policies, and reshapes education. It empowers us to become voices not just for humans, but for those who cannot speak in ways we understand. But perhaps the most powerful shift begins quietly, in the everyday moment when we look into an animal's eyes and no longer see in it, but as someone who feels, someone who matters. This is not just a scientific conclusion. It is an ethical awakening. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the stories. Now the question is yours to answer. What kind of world will you help create? Because if we truly understand that animals can suffer like us, then maybe, finally, it's time we stop treating that suffering like background noise. Let empathy guide the future. Let compassion define our legacy. And let this be more than just a video. Let it be the beginning of change. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly, Understanding how animals experience pain isn't just science, it's empathy. And now you're part of that shift. If this video made you think differently, even for a moment, give it a like. It helps more people discover these stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts too, so drop a comment. Do you believe animals feel pain like we do? What surprised you the most? And if you want more deep dives like this, exploring the hidden truths of the animal world, subscribe to Animal Truths and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next.